Asibonge kakhulu Baba Gulu ukuthi uwamukele abantu. Siyathemba ukuthi lizozizwa lamukelekile kakhulu lana namhlanje. Njalo sizothanda ukuthi nani nibe very involved. Uhlelo sizazama ukuthi silutshintshe kancane ngoba siyazi kakhulu ukuthi ubaba uNtibe Mulope unohlelo futhi olunye okumele ayolwenza. Yikho ke kuzoba kuhle ukuthi simnikeze ithuba akwazi ukuthi asinikeza khona, then abantu bem-engage, then uma efuna ukuphuma engaphuma ke esesiya ku next engagement yakhe. Baba Nthibe Mulope, siyacela ukuthi usinikeze lokho nakho. Bengingazi ukuthi uyakwazi ukukhuluma isintu, manje ngiyakuzwa ukuthi uyakwazi ukukhuluma isintu. Ungakhuluma uhlanganise baba ukwenzela ube comfortable. Siyabonga.
Okay.
Over to you.
Ngiyabonga baba. Ngibingelele la endlini. Ngempela khona uhlelo elikhona la namhlanje ukuthi ngizabe ngilauncha incwadi lana eBotswana. Sasiyenza i-follow up sweeping research ngoba ngingayenza research la eBotswana. Kule ncwadi ekhona manje lebizwa ukuthi uKimzilikazi kaMashobane. All that information is contained lapho. Kodwa manje njengoba besihamba nabo mayisa nje, so njengoba sihamba nabo mayisa, we were basically following up on all those areas where I did research. Ngizoqondisisa ukuthi ngempela those places we go and we take pictures, and we also again talk to people on the ground. So the story of Mzilikazi Kamashobane has captured me for the past, this is year 7 that I've been busy on this research, having started it right down in Mozambique, into Swaziland, South Africa, going into Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, Lesotho, and ultimately Zimbabwe. To a large extent, I would say that the time in Zimbabwe was almost like his where he was taking his going into retirement, because he had really worked quite a bit all the time when he was traveling. Manje one of the ways that I want to try and look at Mzilikazi, and maybe before that, is to say that the reason I undertook this task was to ensure that we don't have all our leaders, African leaders that have contributed so immensely in history, just disappearing out of the pages of history. And where they feature, they are being besmirched. They are being presented as in a way that is very slanted. Because for the greatest of time, the different authors that have authored about Mzilikazi, they have only presented one way in which they wanted Mzilikazi and all other leaders to be seen. And like I was interacting this morning, I was saying to the gentleman who was talking to me that unfortunately, because the people who were producing knowledge and who are central to the production of knowledge, whether from the entertainment side, as in the film and art industry and drama side, knowledge from higher education system, from the universities, from schools and so on, because these were essentially the same people. They triangulated the knowledge. In other words, they made sure that if you want to check the veracity of the information, wherever you go, you'll find that the information was the same. So if somebody said Mzilikazi was just always involved in spilling blood. If you go to libraries in different places in the world and so on, you'll find that the information is consistent, and therefore you are inclined to believe and follow that narrative. And obviously, the other issue is that the people who did that were doing that as in military terms, it's called a preemptive strike. You know, they made a preemptive strike by making the information and making it available before other people can do that, because they knew that they had been involved in causing a whole lot of wars that were happening across the continent, and where people were made to be were enslaved, you know, and people were basically meant to live under most appalling conditions. And so, all right. So that is what has happened broadly, whereby the information is then managed from that level, so that whether you go and study it at the high level at academic institutions, or you look at it from various sources, you'll find a consistent narrative that is being provided. And meanwhile, the manner in which this was being presented, it was also presented with the assistance of all those travelers, researchers, missionaries, who also came with an intent of ensuring that they can actually soften the African people with their philosophy of the white God. And thereafter, it was quite easy for them to then have people that are almost buying into this narrative, that then they were able to push other narratives. So the perspective that I present is that of an African perspective on how we actually can view Mzilikazi from that side, because I see him as one person that you can even present from a project management view, because he was really a project manager to a large extent. You can imagine a person who travels over so many countries for such a protracted period of time, with herds and herds of cattle, into areas where he had no knowledge of what people were like. I mean, the first project management that he had to do was to see that how does he ensure that he manages the movement of the cattle, because as you know, they are animals that do not move in speed, and they rarely get to be in sprint mode or running. How does he coordinate that to ensure that they can be able to move, rest, ruminate, and still get back onto the road, and also be protected from being stolen by other people or basically being taken over? And also he had women and children. So, and he had to make sure that wherever they go and where they were going to be resting, there must be an area which is shielded, which he gets natural coverage, you know, in terms of not being easily identifiable wherever he goes, and that he can also be able to have a place that they can be able to have cattle to graze, and they can be able to have water. And obviously water was also an important resource, because the building of structures was made by it. The making up of different localities, you know, that was water, which was a source that was very important, and obviously for both animals and men and people basically to use. And then the third element was that of war, that the warriors who were traveling around, they had to have the non-warriors carrying the battle weapons for them, but also traveling close to them. And they also had to be at a distance so that they're not easily recognizable. And he had also had to choose the time of day that he had to travel. So that level of project management, you know, shows you that this was not accidental, the manner in which he was moving and how he moved from time to time and got to settle. And I confirmed this also when I went to the different sites that I visited Mzilikazi Estate. Those sites look very identical. If you go to Wonderboom, which is on in the Pretoria side, if you go to the Wilds, which is in the Johannesburg side, if you go to Hartebees, which is in the northwest side, and now in Botswana here in a place called Molapo wa Bojang, the places are quite identical. So which shows that when he was doing his reconnaissance and sending people, he was giving them a particular mandate to say this is what you have to look for. And you can see that does not come by accident, it comes out of planning. And obviously, one of the other things that he was doing was to make sure that the royal house was located very far away from the defensive people who were to defend it, so that he would get early warning systems when there are going to be people attacking, you know, izigijimi zazilapho, so that they would then have to run to the royal house, give them information and tell them how things are going to work. And so that they must prepare themselves either for flight or to fight. And in most cases, he would fight because he knew that he had military prowess. When we were here in Botswana, one of the things that they showed us was that on the mountainside where he stayed, he had a site which they called a collection site. So wherever he collected cattle, they will actually be collected, and they were being positioned in the halfway path of the mountain as you go up. So the highest point in the mountain, which is also obscured, would be where he would sit or where he would be placed. And then the middle path will be where the cattle and even the women that he conquers in the different places will then be settled. So you can see the level of planning that he actually went into. And maybe the last part I will touch before I give over is that even for people that wanted to come and visit him, he made some sort of a checkpoint that he established, so that those people must be sanitized before they come to him. He made Kuruman to be the point where people must go to and be checked and report to Robert Moffat that they're actually going to come and visit him. So if anybody was to come to him directly, he basically would not want to interact with him because he felt that he would then be compromised in that regard. And one of those people was Charles Bell, who actually had decided to just ignore that and come through by himself. And as we know, even the Voortrekkers were the same. They refused to do that and came directly to Mzilikazi. And subsequently, he attacked them because he found them to be undermining his leadership. Yeah, I'll stop there so far.
No, siyabonga kakhulu. Uma bekhona bangabe benembuzo, yiso isikhathi lesi sokuthi simbuze ubaba uNtibe Mlophe. Mina ngizobuza ukuthi kungaba nabantu bakaMzilikazi abasalayo na eTransvaal, and wahlala isikhathi esingakanani eTransvaal?
Yeah, abalindi bakaMzilikazi nabe eSetswana babiza ukuthi ngabalete. Interesting enough, you know, it becomes a bit difficult to talk about the Transvaal because, as you would know, it was choreographed by the Dutch in terms of where they had settled and the locations, the locality. Obviously, you can identify by virtue of the rivers which make it up, because you know they said Transvaal because they're going over the Vaal. But basically, the people who remained are numerous, and not only in what is was the Transvaal, across different parts of Southern Africa. The people we met to 3 days ago, who are called Balete, some of those people that he left here in Botswana. And they acknowledge that in their praises when they talk and define themselves. They say that ke Matebele, you know, and that you find again when you go to the Northwest. People who in their praises, they say they are Botswana, but deep inside they are Matebele. So you know those narratives and stories are many. Even when you go to northern Botswana, going towards Zimbabwe and Zambia, you find a whole lot of Abalindi who have got similar characteristics in that way. So, indeed, what I have found is that Umzilikazi was leaving people behind primarily for two reasons. One, there would be a rear guard, so that if there is a need for him to fetch those people to help him to tackle the issues up front in terms of the battles or so on, then he can be able to fetch them. But at the same time, he also left them with cattle, you know, so the wealth would actually remain there so that he can also be able to know that he can be able to collect it at any stage. And the people that he left behind were also formidable people. For instance, Baleti here in Botswana that we found, they themselves in their history say that they actually were in their own right warriors and they were not pushed around. And we know the history in terms of, even in the recent history where the Botswana government tried to push them out of the land and they put up a fierce battle, including up to the courts. So, which is a character that Umzilikazi had himself. And as they said recently when we met them, that it is now ingrained in their blood.
Okay. Hayi mama Maphoqo wena uphakamisa isandla uyangena kuphela.
Benzama ukuhlonipha. Mthibe, thank you so much for what you've shared with us. Nilembuzo engu-3. I have 3 questions for you. It's
Okay.
it's just to take you on the reverse a little bit. The first
Right.
question, it's maybe to dispel some of the things we hear. And one of the things we hear is that he's a nomadic king. You know, maybe not born of royal blood, etc. But when I speak of nomadic, I speak of a man with no land. So I wanted to understand from you, when you mention about him building structures in these different countries, how he acquires that land. And then the second one is how he builds his armies, because obviously he's encountering armies. So I want to understand Konapo. And then you mentioned Abu Mofat, Abelungu. I also want to understand how useful they were in making him the king and the powerful king that he becomes. Where did they participate in that? Or is this an African story, so to speak? Yeah.
Okay, no, thank you. Yeah, basically in terms of being a nomadic king, as a narrative that is presented, every time Mzilikazi moved, there was a reason that made him to move. It was not moving for its sake. For instance, in Mpumalanga, when he got to move, the biggest problem that he had there was the lack of rainfalls or the scarce rains that were actually being experienced. In fact, at that time, he had even called Izingoma zeZulu to come and help deal with rain. And some of the people that he called in, when they were failing to make it rain, one of the things that Mzilikazi said was that, you know, by being disconnected with Zululand and having moved from there, we have actually lost touch with the land, which for me was a very critical element, and which is related to African people in general, because African people and the land are one, you know. And so at first he settled also in that area because of the terrain is quite similar to that of Zululand. But unfortunately, he realized that you know, it was not doing well for them at some stage. And when he moved further up to the northwest, he found it to be he found arable land, and he also found a whole lot of things working much better. In fact, when he built Mhlahlandlela, he found even some of the fauna there that was there, and the fauna and flora, to be complementing what they require. So even the building of the houses was really being complemented by the type of plants that were around there. But he had to move, and also when the winter came about in the Mpumalanga area, he found it to be quite biting, which was very difficult for them in terms of the way in which they were dressed. And it was not difficult to make that decision that they actually then had to move out of that place. Where they moved in some of the places in near Pretoria and so on was mainly because of the attacks that he had from Dingaan. Because as you know, Dingaan attacked him 3 times. And destroyed the settlements that they had at the places that they were at. So that was the reason he moved. So the movements that he did ultimately were basically related to that. But there were people who, some of those who were left behind at the time that he moved, those Balete, still identified closely with him, including those that are there up till this day. Which is why, just to ramp off a bit, this notion that Mzilikazi used to toss children into the fires makes quite a nuisance, because people would obviously have been so agitated with him and they would have had nothing to do with him. But here it is. They identify with him in their praise songs. They identify with him in the art and artistry that they do. In fact, on the mountain that we went to at Botswana, we found some of the artifacts, some of the broken pots, which have still got Ndebele drawings. So it is very interesting in the manner that how the story is narrated and given to us, and what we ultimately get to find out. In terms of Robert Moffat, and maybe you will say I'm a little extreme, but I don't take Robert Moffat very seriously, because he was part of the missionary project. I mean, people say Robert Moffat gave Mzilikazi direction to go to Zimbabwe, and I doubt that quite a bit, because Mzilikazi actually, at the time he was attacked by Udingan, some of his amajaha babengekho, because they were out there in Zimbabwe already, so he knew the route already. He didn't need a civilian to tell him, as a military man, how he can be able to navigate to go to different places. But of course, Robert Moffat played a bit of a role in terms of engaging with him, and in some way made Mzilikazi's enmity with the Boers to be highlighted, to be heightened, because they saw anybody who was dealing with somebody from the LMS, the London Missionary Society, to be a traitor, because the London Missionary Society was mainly from the British side. So the Dutch thought that they saw him as being too close to the London Missionary Society. And also, Moffat did not really help Mzilikazi much for what Mzilikazi wanted. He wanted Moffat to help him to get guns, and to also to help to repair guns. And Robert Moffat refused to do that. He repaired 1 or 2 guns, but from there he refused. But at the end of the day, which is what Fidelis Ncube in his book says, and I quote here, that instead, Robert Moffat's son, John, was one of those people who was involved in selling out Amandebele to Cecil John Rhodes, because he was involved in conniving with the British against Mzilikazi and Amandebele.
And then the army, sir.
Okay, the army he made up, he was always looking for some of the most fierce fighters, and which is why when he came in and found Basotho Nabatswana, he was not very impressed with their fighting skills and prowess. And that's why when he met Amandebele, Awaga Makotongo, Nawaga Sibindi, he was quite impressed. And even later, when he was joined by Uzwangendaba, he knew that these people are fierce fighters, and therefore he was happy to get them to put in. But obviously, there were some outstanding individuals amongst Botswana who also became warriors, like the Kampuas who was in Moseja. So yeah, but the making up of the military was basically a thing that he specifically wanted to ensure that he can deal with it with people who have got a certain level of competence that he was looking for.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. We have 3 questions from Alex Ndebele Siminkala. I don't know if you want to grab the mic, both of you, so that we ask the author. Asiqale Alex Ndebele. If you can unmute Alex, if you're around. Oh. Okay, since Alex is not on the mic,
Sorry.
Okona, oh, thank you.
Yeah, ngikhona. Yeah, ngiyabonga ithuba. Ngithanda ukuthi ngibuze Baba Nthibe.
Yebo.
Ukuba umzilikazi lapha ma wayehamba nebutho lakhe nezinkomo. You talked about him setting up structures. Structures are almost identical from one area to another area. Endithanda ukuthi ngikuzwisise ukuthi wayehamba akahlale isikhathi njalo wayekwenza kanjani ukuthi afike akhethe lezi ndawo ahlale. Did he not face any resistance along the way? Lokuba kule information na engabe isitshengisa ukuthi kulezinye na indawo lapho athi esithi uyafika ehlala wathola ukuthi uyalwiswa kakhulu. Nxa zikhona ngithanda ukuthi nje nxa ungasibaluleka ngazo lezo ndawo.
Okay. One thing that shows Uguti he stayed for some time. For example, the place here in Botswana and even in Magaliesburg and so on are the type of structures which are there. Most of them, Botswana being very particular because we even found the type of, I'll call it indigenous cement that they made, which was formed out of cow dung and burnt cow dung and dried after being mixed with water as well, which then, as they dry it, it actually compresses into a heavy stone-like substance. Now, all of those things you can see they actually need time to be made. And the walls which still remain up to this day are currently at waist level. And the tour guys were indicating that these walls were actually now okay. So the stone walls, it is clear that they were much higher, and the tour guys say that some of them were knocked over by animals as they were going around there, because obviously there is nobody who is now looking after it. And even the thatch roof, which was there, is no longer there, probably has been bent out and something like that. But just from the mere manner in which these structures are, and how numerous they are, it is clear that there was a lot of time that was taken to actually construct all of those things. And also that they are up on the mountain. It is certain types of stones in the manner of the building. Very interesting, because he uses some small stones in between the big stones to balance them and to make it up. But it's an amazing thing. And to think about it, if you look at it, we were even saying some of this makeup almost looks like something like what is done in modern day Zimbabwe, which shows that this is an art which is actually residual amongst African people. You know, that this is not just a knowledge system which was unique to the Kalangas who were found in Zimbabwe when people got in there, but basically this is a residual knowledge system amongst African people in general, because this same type of structures I had also seen somewhere in the Middleburg area, very close to where Mzilikazi passed, which was made by Bapedi. So clearly, these type of things confirm the fact that the artwork and the structures architecturally, this is a knowledge that Africans had always been sitting with, and it was being modified over time, where people started to then use mortar and so on. On the other hand, there is an issue in terms of the people where he settled. In several areas, people say that they never really had a problem with Mzilikazi or had conflict with him. But others do say that he roughed them up. Bapedi, for instance, in where what is next to what is called the Oliphant River and Tubatsi River, the oral history says that he basically came surprised almost as a surprise to attack them. But on the Ndebele side, the history is that they were mocking fun at them when they were passing and going to build settle at Mhlahlandlela. And so he captured them and he actually enslaved them to build Mhlahlandlela themselves. So yes, there are different narratives in terms of the experiences, but the majority of people state that they actually voluntarily even joined him. And you can look at the Bataung, for instance, Tauya Mulezane, who first had fought with Mzilikazi and even had joined hands with the Griquas to fight against Mzilikazi, but later came to Mzilikazi and asked for protection from him. So there are several different narratives in terms of how the experiences were in terms of his interacting with people. And of course, one of the elderlies that we met just the other day was saying that you would expect that something like this would happen when a stranger comes into your area, and he does not have enough grain, he does not have much food, and only coming with a whole lot of those people that he comes with. He will in all probability he'll first come and negotiate with you, but if it doesn't work, he will then use force. And we must also not discount the fact that the era of about from around 1820 to around 1840, 1845 was a very violent era, which is the violence that has spilled over even from, as I argue in my book, from the encroachment of the European people who are coming into the East.
If possible, could you make your answers very short? Okay. Because now you only have 5 minutes and there are two more questions.
Okay, no, let me take those ones. Hopefully I've covered this one.
Over to you, Mapok.
Thank you, Baba Nthibe. We're enjoying the answers. That's why I didn't stop you there. But can I get Usimi and Pat close to the mic? We'll ask both questions at the same time. And Baba Nthibe, I'll help you in case you forget anything. So Simi, okay. Can you come through and ask your question, please? If you're not quick to grab the mic,
technology is dealing with me right here.
Thank you, my sister. Thank you. So please go ahead.
Greetings to everyone.
Yebo.
Professor, umbuzo wami is going to be short, maybe in respect of time, njengoba kukhulunywa ngesikhathi laphaya. But you just mentioned something that I found interesting when you mentioned that the people and the land are one, or have always been one, or are currently one as is. So I find that interesting. Then I asked the question, Uguti, what does that mean in terms of issues of identity, in terms of us identifying ourselves as Abantu?
Thank you, Sisimi. We'll go to the next question as well. Pat, I've got Pat's phone. If you can come through to the mic.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loud and clear.
All right, quick one. Prof, thank you very much for doing this. I'm a Kumaro myself, so this really goes to my heart, what we have done, the work you've done on the research of the King Mzilikazi travels. My two questions are very quick. The first one is there a library with the artifacts or any pieces of information that was collected in the interaction between Mzilikazi and Robert Moffat? Because I read a book called The Path of Blood, written by a guy called Peter, I can't remember his surname. He mentions that library, and there are pictures of Unandi, one of Mzilikazi's wives. I can't remember the name.
Peter
And-
Becker.
And guess
Yeah, Peter Becker.
Oh, Peter Becker, yes. Peter Becker, yes. In that book, he's got pictures that he seems to refer to a library or some kind of museum
Peter
where
Becker.
I'm an artifacts are. Yeah.
Peter Becker.
Yes, Peter Becker, yes. That's correct. So is there a library, Elama, like was an artifact on allow? If it is there, where is it? I would love to visit that library. The second last question is, the relationship between Mzilikazi and Moffat seems to have been quite extensive because igama likaLobhengula kukhanya ngathi bathi uLobhengula was quite unwell at some point in his life ekhula. Then uMoffat helped treat Lobhengula. When he visited, wayebuza ukuthi uphi lo obegula, but because wayengekho fluent in the language, wagcina kuphuma igama likaLobhengula ena ehluleka ukuthi uphi lo obegula. I don't know how far true that is.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pat. Mtibe, are you able to answer those three questions?
Okay, yeah.
In a summary.
All right, sure. The issue of the land and the people being one, yes, it is true. And what Mzilikazi also did was that wherever he had gone, I mean, the tracts of land that he got, it was a given that was then the new home, which they then identified with. And which is why at the time when people were then being displaced, and incidentally, in the Transvaal, as you were saying earlier, the people were only displaced after 1838, after Mzilikazi was moved out of town. The first town, Potchefstroom, was established in 1838. There was no town that was established before 1838. So, which shows you the significance of Mzilikazi in terms of the history of South Africa in itself. I'll leave it at that. The issue in terms of the library, there was a library in Johannesburg that was called the Africana Library. But unfortunately, because we really don't take care of our history, our heritage, our culture. I went to that library because I had seen a number of things that were talking about it, but I found that they were remodeling it. And now the pictures that are full there are pictures of Mandela and the ANC, and I'm not saying anything negative about that, but what I know is that our history did not start in 1912, but that is the impression which is now starting to be created around that library. So all those things that I had seen, fortunately, I have got a collection that was passed on from my dad, which is called Southern African Encyclopedia. and all those pictures I've been able to see there, and they refer to the Africana Museum and Library. That's how I also got to know. But otherwise, the rest is almost like lost. We really haven't got it. And about Lobengula, yes, it is true. He was quite sickly when he was young, but I don't really only ascribe it to Lobengula because to Robert Moffat, but even within the family, because he also was raised amongst some of the traditional doctors who were attending to him. And when he became better, then they were referring to him as Lobegegula, but cannot be exclusively ascribed to Robert Moffat. For me, and maybe I'm starting to have an attitude towards Robert Moffat, I think Robert Moffat is given far too much credit than he deserves.
Okay. Thank you for that. And to our listeners, because of the restriction in time, we're going to just go through these last 3 questions. After that, there'll be no more questions. I hope Mtibe is fine with that.
Okay, I don't know what the time is, but yeah, that's fine. I'm preparing for my afternoon presentation.
Event.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll get them to ask the questions together, and same routine. Can we get Kulu Ndabezinhle Kulu to ask your question quickly?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ntebe. Sikhule thina eZimbabwe ezikolweni and everywhere i-narrative kaMzilikazi sizwa kuthiwa ku-relationship yakhe lo Shaka wayethunyiwe ubana ahambe aye collector izinkomo ayehlasela abuye lezi nkomo then wasebaleka lazo lezo nkomo never to return. Yikho ke lapho waqala khona ke umsindo between yena lo Shaka. How true is that?
Okay, thank you. Can we go to Bokani Hafani?
Ngibingelele. My question briefly is, King Mzilikazi was presented as a brutal, violent invader warrior king. You stated that he is not a one-dimensional king, suggesting that he had other virtues or softer skills. Lapha bengicela ukuza ukuthi, particularly in terms of nation building, was this a nation built by force or kwakulokunye okusoft okulungileyo kwakusenza ukuthi abantu bahugeke embusweni wakhe? Ngiyabonga.
Ngiyabonga Bokani. Many things can be true at the same time, but I'll leave the author to answer that. Ngicela umgodi to ask his question.
Yebo dade, ngiyabonga. Ntate Mulo, ngicela ukubuza Khuri, let's fast forward to modern day Zimbabwe, where inkosi uMzilikazi established iMatabeleland.
Ngiyacela bandla, please mute your mics. It will help us with the program, and it will help us with time. Okay, please continue.
Yeah, quickly, so where he established modern day Matabeleland together with Amakalanga. Now there are noises coming from Amakalanga, wanting to revive their own separate Ilokuzeni kingdom as distinct from that established one. So how do we? What are your comments on these developments?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Do you want to answer those 3 questions and then?
Okay. About uShaka noMzilikazi, you know, when they talk of iThakazelo zabantu, one of the ways as they praise, talk of their praise singings, but Khumalo batu mabedla bayengu umuntu ngendaba. I don't know how familiar people are with that. The Khumalos down in Zululand say that expression actually came when Mzilikazi was poking fun at uShaka. And you would know also there is an expression where it is said within the praise singing that wa lubudli umlenze kwabulawayo bathi umlenze wankomone lo. Inkomo zakithi ziningi lekhaya. Now, this one about mabedle bayengumuntu ngendaba. It is said that because the family of the Kumalos, they say that actually the conflict between Mzilikazi and Shaka was actually manufactured within the house, because somehow they would see that this thing was not going to last, and therefore they got him to go and get the cattle from Ranisi. And so now when they were sending him out, the Shaka then gave him some elderly men to go and assist him, with the knowledge that if he goes with these elderly men, they will be defeated and they will be killed with him. But what Mzilikazi then did, he turned the thing around, and he took the elderly men, he made them, and he took also his immediate guard of soldiers. And so when he got there, he got the elderly men to be seated on the mountainside. Because it was dusk, it was getting towards dusk, and then the immediate guard went to Ranisi and told him that, look, you must surrender your cattle, but you must do it quietly. Move away so that nobody sees that you are running. You see, I'm here with all those warriors, pointing at the elderly men. But because it was dusk, when he was looking up the mountain, he just saw thousands of, many troops that were sitting there, not knowing that they were being amakhetla. And so when he took the cattle and went back, he decided that, no, I'm not going to surrender this cattle. And instead, when Ushaka asked for the cattle, it is said he only gave him the old cattle as a way of getting back at him, to say that because you were giving me old men with the hope that I will die, I'm now giving you old cattle back. And so then they started to enjoy some of the cattle. And then when Shaka sent his men to come and ask about the cattle, they say they found him eating. And so that's why they say, so they were saying, he was saying that lithini lembe ngeenkomo, ake nimnikeni le nkomo zakhe ezigugile. So that's what the story comes about. But yeah, just shortly, that's what is said around it by the Kumalos themselves in KZN. The issue about being brutal and melding people, I think a classical example of that, in terms of the soft skills that he was using, is what we saw even today, recently here, in that amongst Balete, there are a number of different communities. There are still Ndebeles, there are Batlokwa, there are Bangwaketsi, there are Bakwena, and they all have got different heads. So in other words, a Mokwena will be actually having a Mokwena headman, Amandebele like that, and so on. But they all recognize themselves as Balete, Abalindi. So, and if you look at the current Zimbabwe, you almost have a similar type of mirror setup, where you've got vendors, you've got Tsongas, you've got Abakatla, which you guys call Abakandla, and so on, within, and they all consider themselves to be part of Twagazi, but their identities are not erased. And that is something that Usoshangani failed to do. And because Soshangani basically was taking people and getting them to leave everything else that was making them to be who they are, that is why people were revolting around there. But in Mzilikazi, in all these different places, he allowed people even to use their own different distinct dress codes, but that initially they must realize that they are all part of Mtwegazi. So they are one, but different in their diversities. Almost talking to the South African code of arms, which talks about unity in diversity. The question of what was the last question?
The relationship with the Bakalanga.
Oh yes, I think it happens over time. If whatever you have built, you do not nurture, you don't look after it, it will start to fall apart. And in my criticism of Mzilikazi, one of the critiques that I put forward is that, one, he did not put up a proper succession strategy. you know, and because his rule was so powerful, that is why when you move from Mzilikazi to Lobengula, the whole thing started to fall apart, you know, and people basically feeling that they were the right ones to take over. And unfortunately, that is happening to this day, because to emulate what Mzilikazi has done is almost impossible. And you know, this type of people you only have once in a lifetime, and that's we are seeing it with our naked eye up till today. And Abakalanga and amongst other people then feel that they'd rather be going their own way and doing their own thing, moving away from that. But we know that in the early days, even including Amashona, they fought side by side with Amandebele against the British at first, but then turned their backs to that at the later stage. So yeah, I mean, we can continue to mourn the passing of Mzilikazi as we celebrate his legacy.
Okay, thank you for that, sir. Sisti, Lo Prof, just very quickly, please.
Abasafuni ngihambe labantu.
Yeah, abasafuna sifuni. Sisti, please go ahead.
Ngitsheleni ke ukuthi ngize lapha kunina ekhaya.
Yeah,
We will have more
mine
time.
is not a question, Bagiti. Good afternoon, everyone. Mine is not a question, it's just to give you a little direction. eHarare kulo mfundiso okuthiwa nguFather Nigel Johnson owama-Jesuits bale library that has got a lot of history yabo Mzilikazi, eyabo Moffat, even labo Lobengula. Whether ile information that can help or not, so isikhathi I last went there, but they were really huge library with those things. So if maybe you get into Bulawayo, into Harare, look for the Jesuit house and look for Father Nigel Johnson, and then you can actually get some of the things. Just that was just for me to help. Thank you.
Highly appreciated, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Prof, please go ahead. Siyabonga Sisti. Oh, Prof.
Baba Mpofu. Yeah, khuluma Baba Mpofu.
Whilst he's trying to find his mic, Nkala, which direction are we going?
We're going to ask for yena ubaba Mpofu after that. Kube nguye osinikeze i-lecture ngoba uvundla uKex is not here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whilst we still have you, Mtibe, can you please quickly tell us where people can get the book to see your work?
Okay, no, the book is available on Amazon, both as a Kindle soft copy as well as in hard copy. And of course, because I'll be launching the book in Zimbabwe in September, I'm going to have limited edition of the book in hardcover. Everything color obviously will be a little bit pricey, but it is going to be made specifically to commemorate the launch in Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Yeah, and which will be like a first year anniversary of the book.
Okay. Thank you very much for this time that you've afforded us. And Vandla, you can get the book Lizwile online, Kindle and Amazon. And also he's doing the book launch. So if you follow Ubaban Tibe, you'll be able to get the book. And the title of the book, just a quick one, title.
The title is King Mzilikazi kaMashobane. And if maybe some people are lucky, they can talk to Umaisa. If he's got enough space in his bag, I can then autograph those books if they would like to do that, because he's gonna be here until Sunday.
Okay. Siyabonga baba. Mr. Nkala?
Yeah, asibonge kakhulu Baba Nthibe. Umsebenzi wakho omuhle ngokusidocumentela ihistory yenkosi uMzilikazi kaMashobane. Mbone ngathi umsebenzi owenzileyo uzosinikeza ifoundation kakhulu njengomthwakazi, ngoba uze ngenye angle abantu akade bengezi ngayo. So siyabonga kakhulu.